Hello, and welcome to another live broadcast here in the Authentic Married Woman. I'm your host, Karen Seitz, and I'm a coach and a mentor for married women to teach them how to reconnect to themselves again. Because one of the most common issues we experience as women in our relationships with men, and then especially in our marriages, is that we get lost from who we are and we lose our sense of self identity, and as a result, we're very unhappy on the inside. And that's the core issue that we need to work on to solve what's going on in ourselves so that we can solve the issues in our marriage and finally have the marriage that we always dreamed of and that we always wanted. So today I wanted to come on and I'm switching things up, doing an evening video. So that's fun and new. But I wanted to come on tonight and talk about three critical mistakes that you are making in your marriage and what you should do instead. And what we're going to be talking about tonight may be very different than what you're expecting. A lot of times we might hear, the mistakes we're making is, communication is off. There's our needs aren't being met. We're not arguing in the right way. So everything kind of boils down to communication. And we're going to be talking about some very different things tonight, of what you're doing in your marriage that's keeping you stuck and not allowing you to move forward and resolve the issues. So, we're going to be talking about the most common ways that we work on our marriages to try to solve the problems, but that they actually keep us stuck in a cycle of codependency. And this is something that a common thread that I run through the videos to help you see a new perspective, to give you fresh insight onto what you might be missing that's stopping you from getting to where you want to be. And what we mean by codependency is that when you work on your marriage in a way where you're wanting your partner to change or you're wanting him to be a certain way to meet your needs, to make you feel better on the inside, that's where you get lost from yourself and you put the responsibility of your well being and your happiness in the hands of your husband and in the hands of things and people that are completely out of your control. And so we never resolve the root issues. We're constantly tackling the surface issues and never get to where we need to go. So a lot of times when we're working on our marriages, we're really not getting to the root issue. We're using band-aid approaches that, much like a band-aid, might stop the bleeding for a little bit, but it doesn't heal the wound and get to where we need to get to. And so the myth we're busting tonight by exploring these three critical mistakes that you're making in your marriage is that conventional wisdom works. That's the myth we're busting, that conventional wisdom works. And what I mean by conventional wisdom is that's what we're being taught by marriage experts and by the books out there and marriage counseling, that marriage is 50-50, and to make a relationship healthy it needs to be about meeting each other's needs and doing what we need to do to make the other person happy and secure in the relationship, and that a relationship is 50-50. And all the methods out there, all the ways that the approaches that we generally believe and generally try, that's what I mean by conventional wisdom, and we think that it works. So we read the books, we do the marriage counseling, and we end up stuck in the same places or coming up against the same issues over and over and over again because we're being given misleading information that that doesn't work to get to the root of the problems and solve those issues. Like I said, they might give us short-term solutions and short-term band-aids to the problems in our marriage, but it's not getting again to where we need to get to. So let's talk about why really quick. And I'm going to do just an overview of the three principles that set the framework for our group and the framework for what I teach. And I'm going to use the three principles to then look underneath that to see, okay, what are the root issues? What are the root problems we really need to work on? And then get into those three mistakes that we're making that do not solve those root issues. So the first principle is that you are 100% responsible for your happiness. And we hear that again and again, but we get so caught up in the trap of thinking that someone or something can make us happy, that they can change in some way that will relieve our unhappiness and make us feel good. And that's impossible because happiness, as we've also heard, is an inside job. It's something that we have to do for ourselves and that we have to cultivate within ourselves. The second principle is that the only person you have any control over to change is yourself. You can't change your husband. You can't get him to do certain things or get him to stop doing things. The only person you have control over to change is yourself. And the third principle is that being an authentic married woman or just being an authentic woman is about having a relationship with yourself, knowing who you are, feeling good about who you are, and understanding yourself, and then being able to bring yourself into your life, into your relationship. So let's look at the flip side of those to understand the root issue of what's going on that causes the issues that we have in our marriage and causes issues in other relationships in our lives, in other areas of our life. So if we flip those around, that first principle, you are responsible for your happiness. The real issue that's going on underneath that's causing the issues in your marriage and other areas in your life is being unhappy on the inside, not feeling good about who you are, having this void and emptiness that you're constantly trying to feel so you don't feel whole. In some ways, you feel incomplete. And that is a complaint that I get across the board with my female clients is that they feel the sense of incompleteness and they don't feel whole on the inside, and that nothing that they gravitate towards, their marriage, um, their family, their work, nothing completes them. Nothing makes them feel whole and fulfilled on the inside. And that's a root issue. So all those problems that we experience in a marriage that might be anywhere from feeling ignored or feeling unheard or feeling undesired or like we're unappreciated, all of those are symptoms of a much deeper issue of being unhappy within ourselves and our marriage and other areas of our life are reflecting that back to us. So, that second principle, if we flip that, a major issue that we need to resolve within ourselves is we're constantly looking for others and things outside of us to change our experience, or we're looking for things out here to change instead of focusing on changing the one person we can, which is ourselves. And so when we're constantly focused on the issues out here and trying to change what's out here, we get caught up in a victim mentality and being victims. We end up blaming the circumstances in our lives. We end up blaming our husbands for where we are and what's wrong and our unhappiness, which keeps us completely stuck and powerless. We can't change because we're waiting for our husband to change, or we're waiting for our circumstances out here to change. And that is futile. And then if those things do change, it doesn't resolve that underlying unhappiness. It's a short-term fleeting experience. It doesn't last. So if we flip that third principle around, the opposite of having a relationship with ourselves is not having a relationship with ourselves and feeling lost from who we are and not knowing who we are, not understanding ourselves, which is again another really common complaint that I get from the women that I work with. It was my main issue with myself before I learned to have a relationship with myself and to get to understand me, is I had no idea who I was. I thought I knew who I was. I would have told you that I knew who I was, but deep down there was an emptiness inside of me, and I was always trying to be who I thought I needed to be to please my husband, to please the people in my life, to be who I thought I needed to be to get the things that I desired in life, or to get the relationships that the type of relationships that I wanted. And in the process of that, became very lost for myself. And that was probably, I mean, take all three of those things, being unhappy on the inside, trying to change people and things that you have absolutely no control over, and not knowing who you are and not understanding yourself, if those three things are going on, those are the real issues. And everything else you're experiencing in your marriage or your life, those are just symptoms of what's really going on the inside. And those things are showing up in your marriage and showing up in those different areas, maybe with your kids, or maybe with your family, or maybe with your job. That's being reflected out there. So we've got to focus on that first. So now that we know kind of what the real issue is, let's talk about where we get misled, and the three mistakes that you're making that keep you stuck, not working on the real issues. And hello, someone just said hi. I can never see who it is in the platform that I use to do the live videos, but hi, and thank you for saying hi, and thank you to all of you for watching and being here with me. It's always really nice to have that. So, all right, so let's get into that first mistake. So the first mistake that we're making, and this might be a hard truth to swallow, because coming from someone who loved all the books, this can be hard to hear. But the first mistake you're making is reading a lot of books on marriage, and reading books like The Five Love Languages and Hold Me Tight and Seven Principles for Making a Marriage Work and Love and Respect. Again, not that there can't be helpful things in there, but everything you read in that is going to foster that codependency, because it's all based on what you need your partner to do for you to make you happy and make you feel safe and secure in the relationship. And none of that is going to be lasting. That's a band aid approach. It's a short term solution, because as soon as your husband stops speaking your love language, stops doing the things to try to meet your needs, you're going to be back at square one, feeling ignored, feeling unheard, feeling unseen, feeling misunderstood. So it makes you dependent on your husband to be a certain way and to do certain things for you in order to ensure your well-being and your happiness. And so that doesn't work. And again, not that there aren't helpful things in that, but it's not going to be a solution to the real problem. Because remember, the real problem is that unhappiness on the inside and that lack of relationship with yourself, and getting caught up trying to change things that you have zero control over to change. So the other challenge with reading books as a way to work on the problems in your marriage and to try to solve those issues is that it's just more information. And so, coming from someone who was I call myself a book junkie, and specifically a self help book junkie at one point in my life, no exaggeration, I had over 200 books that I had ordered for Amazon that were on my bookshelves, and they were all under the realm of self help, and books on marriage, and books on how to have better sex and all these things. And it was just information overload, where it was so much information I couldn't even apply any of it. And the hard thing about the books is they might have really good ideas, but very, very few books give you a how to. Very few books give you a how to implement and how to get to where you want to be in your life. We don't need more information. One of my teachers and mentors says something along the lines is that a big problem that we have that we get lost in, where we can't, he says, empty our cups and learn something new and apply something new, is because a lot of times we have way too much knowledge and very little understanding about how to apply and how to execute. Or we have so much knowledge that we think we know it all. We think we've got it figured out, and yet we're not changing, and we're not getting to where we want to be in our lives. And I am completely guilty of that, where there's a long time in my life where I had, like I said, all the books and so much information, and I wasn't doing anything with it. I might try it for a little bit, but then something else would catch my attention, and then I was on to that, and collected all these books, but my life and my marriage were still in the same spot. None of it got me to where I needed to be, because what I really needed was someone to hold my hand and take me through teaching me how to make myself happy, teaching me why I am unhappy and what's going on in my beliefs and what's going on in my stories that are causing me to be stuck in my life, stuck in my marriage, and coming up against the same problems. I needed someone to coach me through and teach me how to transform my life and how to take action and how to make new choices. We don't need more information. We need to be in an environment that is transformational and pushes us. So that's another challenge with the books is they're the easy way. We get kind of for me, it was always I got really excited about the new information, and I was like, this is it. This is going to be the thing that finally changes my marriage, and this is going to be the thing that finally changes my life. And it was such a fleeting experience. It never lasted. And then none of those books actually really helped me and got me to where I needed to be, because they're the easy way. And anything that is transformational and allows us to change in a deep internal way, it's going to include hard work. It's going to require commitment. It's going to require accountability. And that's how we get to transformation. It's not more information. And yeah, so another piece on this is, especially with the books, we're trying to do everything ourselves. And if you could have done it on your own, you would have already done it. And I know that can be a tough pill to swallow, one of my favorite phrases. But really, and that's what I had to realize at some point in my life. I was like, Karen, come on. You're reading all these books, but you're not getting to where you want to be. Your marriage is slowly getting worse and worse and worse, and the issues aren't getting solved. And if you could have done it, you would have done it already by now. So books are kind of, we think we can do it on our own, but really we got to get in there and we got to figure out what's going on below the surface and not just put band-aids over the issues in our marriage, but really take a look in the mirror and maybe even learn to use our marriage as a mirror to see what the real issues are within ourselves that cause us to stay unhappy, and that cause us to continue not knowing who we are and being lost from ourselves. So the second mistake that you're making in your marriage, and again, not that this can't be helpful, not that there aren't good tools in this, but it does not provide long-term solution and long-term results, is actually marriage counseling and couples counseling. And again, I hope you can see the common thread through these. I mentioned it in the beginning, is that these things foster codependency. So I think every freeze frame of my video has me doing this. But this is my best example for really talking about codependency. Is that, so here's what couples counseling does is, or marriage counseling is, so here's your partner and here is you. And in couples counseling, your counselor is teaching your husband what he needs to do to meet your needs, and you're learning what you need to do to meet his needs so that you can both be happy. And that creates an enmeshment because you become dependent on your partner to be a certain way, to do certain things, to fulfill your needs and to meet your needs, and vice versa. So what happens then if you can't be that or do that for each other, and you can't fulfill each other's needs, which is impossible anyways, then that unhappiness and your well-being is toast because it's not coming from the inside. So it's important to understand that if we do not know how to meet our own needs, how to make ourselves feel appreciated, how to make ourselves feel loved and whole and understood, if we don't know how to do that for ourselves, really, when you think about it, how is anyone else supposed to do that for you? That is impossible. And it creates so much expectation. And most of us, if we're being honest with ourselves, know that expectation leads to massive disappointment, resentment, bitterness, and what's really going on. Those are, again, are just the symptoms. What you're seeing in your marriage is just a symptom of what's going on, is that you're not meeting your own needs. You're not doing what you need to do for yourself to take care of you and for you to feel good about yourself and for you to feel understood by you and loved by you. And when we're not doing that, when we're not meeting our own needs, what happens at an unconscious level and at a deep level is that we don't feel good about ourselves. And that's a cause of then us being unhappy. We don't feel full and complete within ourselves and whole within ourselves. And we're not doing what we need to do for ourselves to feel good. And so we end up feeling bad about ourselves. And the way that the mind works is we don't want to expose that. This is what's going on unconsciously that we can't see, that we've got to shine the light on. We can't see that. We don't want to see that because that's going to cause us to feel exposed. It's going to cause us to face emotional discomfort. It's going to cause us to be vulnerable. And it's going to push us towards change, which as humans, we are terrified of at a very fundamental level. We are terrified of change on the inside and real deep transformational change and the unknown and the uncertainty. We're terrified of that. And we're also terrified of being exposed for what's really going on. So we cover that up within ourselves. We cover it up that we don't feel good about ourselves and that we're not doing the things we need to do for ourselves. And that's a game and a trick we play to protect ourselves. But again, we're not really protecting ourselves. And what ends up happening is that we project that negative feeling that we have about ourselves and those insecurities and those fears and unhappiness, we end up projecting that onto our husband and think that they need to start doing certain things to fill our needs when really the problem is with us. So couples counseling becomes a band-aid to cover that up, and you never really get to address the real issue, which is within yourself. And I want to add just a little note right here for those of you who maybe haven't heard this in our other videos, or you might be new, or you might just need the reminder. The premise of our message and the premise of what I teach is when you're doing what you need to do for yourself to create happiness within yourself and to feel good about yourself, and you are with a good man, he responds to that. And he steps up and shows up in ways that you could never have imagined. And you can actually appreciate it and acknowledge it because you're doing those things for yourself. So you're not expecting that from him. And you're not needing that from him because you already are that for yourself. And that's the magic behind this. And it's so fascinating to me to watch my clients experience this. And I experience it every day on my marriage or in my marriage is learning to, or the other piece of that is when we have our walls up as women and we're with good men, we end up pushing them away and they withdraw from the relationship and they might become shut down or they might become defensive. But when we can learn to take our walls down and find our happiness within and be who we are without those walls, good men respond in incredible ways because at their nature, they are loving and caring. But when we've got our walls up and we're projecting our unhappiness onto them, then that's all we see. We just see what's wrong. So when we can do that work for ourselves and take our walls down, they respond in whole new ways and we can see them for who they are and experience that lovingness and experience that care. But when we have those expectations on them and think they need to be a certain way to make us feel good in the relationship, then that's where we end up with all the resentment and bitterness. And marriage counseling or couples counseling just covers, again, that real issue up that is within ourselves and it becomes a band-aid approach. And we have a whole video, excuse me, where we dive into why couples counseling doesn't work for long-term solutions and for resolution of the issues in a marriage. So I'll post that in the comment section when I get done. And another interesting fact is over the years at a New Life Center, we've worked with a ton of marriage counselors. We actually have a couple testimonial videos in the group too of women who are licensed professional counselors and marriage therapists, and they came to work with us because they deep down know something is missing in that conventional wisdom of marriage counseling, that it doesn't provide that long-term solution. So they were at a loss and needed help, and I think that's an interesting perspective too, to know that relationship professionals and therapists and marriage counselors, they have issues just like all of us. And they don't have the answers. That if what they were able to teach and provide really worked at a fundamental level for those long-term changes, then we wouldn't work with so many marriage counselors and therapists. And it shows that it's just there's something missing, and it's that we're not getting to the root of the problem and working on the marriage and working on being who we think we need to be for our partners. It just gets us really stuck and can often create a lot more resentment and a lot more challenges in a marriage. So just wanted to throw that in. So, all right. So moving into the third mistake. So our first two, the first was reading books about marriage and reading the love languages and the Love and Respect and Hold Me Tight and those other books that are out there. Not that they can't be helpful, but they foster that codependency. It's not you finding your happiness within. It's still depending on your partner to be a certain way to make you happy. And then that second mistake is marriage counseling. And again, same thing, fosters codependency. It's a band aid approach. It does not give us long term solutions. So the third mistake that we're making or that you're making in your marriage that's holding you back is commiserating with your girlfriends about your marriage and the issues and the problems with your husband and looking for advice and asking for advice from people who do not have successful, healthy marriages or relationships. And it's really fascinating. I noticed this for myself when I started to really take responsibility and let go of blame. I realized how much I actually commiserated and complained about the issues in my marriage and the issues with my husband, with my girlfriends, and even some of my family members, like my sister. Um, I would just vent and vent and vent, and the challenge with that and the problem in that is that 99.9% of the time, whoever we're venting to or commiserating with, they're going to validate what we're feeling. Yes, he should pay attention to you more. He's such a jerk. I can't believe he's doing that. And that validates our stories of why we think our husbands or our marriage or whatever it is we're venting about is making us unhappy. And we get really locked down in that, and then we can't get out of our stories. And it just, again, it keeps us trapped in that, and we can't get out, and it just validates why we're unhappy because of what's going on out here, which again, like I said earlier, makes us victims of our circumstances instead of recognizing that we have choices and we have things we need to work on ourselves to change those issues. And so after women have worked with me for a little bit and they're shifting their mindset and shifting their perspective to taking responsibility, I can't tell you how many times they'll come in or I'll meet with them and they're like, I don't know what to talk about with my friends anymore. I all we talk about it or all we do is complain and vent, and it just feeds all this victimhood, and I cannot do that anymore. And they have to start to learn to talk about constructive things and talk about the good things and talk about the positive things and not complain because they realized how complaining and commiserating keeps them so stuck where they're at and keeps them so stuck in those issues. And then it creates a lot of disdain and resentment towards their husbands. And I think someone was just sharing with me today about how when they're in a group of women and they're commiserating, a lot of women will come home angry at their husbands because all that's been stirred up and they're convinced it's their husbands that's the problem and what he's doing and all the things that's wrong with him. And so it really, like I keep saying, it really keeps us stuck. And so then the other part of that is asking for advice from people who don't have successful marriages. And if you look at that, like how is someone who's not walking the talk and isn't successful in their own relationship or their own marriage, how are they going to help us with ours? That's impossible. And a lot of times we live in this belief that we think that everybody else has happy relationships. And sadly, in my experience of working with so many women and also working with men, and in a lot of what we see in the Facebook group, and I'll share too about other groups, is that in reality, very few people have their relationship or their marriage figured out, and very few people are actually truly happy and truly thriving in their marriage and relationship. And we can see that by looking through some of the common experiences that we have and the common complaints we have. Take a look at the comments in some of the posts or most of the posts in the Facebook group, and you'll see very few people have it figured out. Very few people know what to do to have a successful relationship. And I'm part of some other groups on marriage in Facebook, probably like maybe two or three, and it's the same thing I see in there. It's not just women in our group. It's across the board where we're really stuck in the issues, feeling like roommates, no intimacy, lack of connection, barely talking, sleeping in separate rooms. Um, all those things are really common across the board, and we don't have it figured out because, again, the myth we're busting today is that we think conventional wisdom works, and we're busting that today and saying if it worked, there wouldn't be so many women in our group and so many women in the other groups on marriage and relationships suffering and unhappy and having the same problems. That's why we have a divorce rate of 50%, is because what we think works isn't working. And so just wrapping up that third one, that commiserating and getting that advice from people who don't have successful relationships is just going to validate your unhappiness and keep you stuck focusing on the things that will not work to change the issues and to change the things that you are experiencing. So those are the three mistakes: reading books on marriage, couples counseling, and then commiserating with girlfriends or loved ones or getting advice from people who don't have successful relationships. So what do we need to do instead? What's the solution? So we need to not be focusing on our marriages. That's another video I did a few weeks ago, and a surefire way to fail is working on your marriage. And I'll post that in the comments section too. We need to work on those deeper issues. Stop putting band-aids over what's really going on inside, the real wound that creates all those symptoms in our marriage and all those symptoms in our other relationships. So we have to learn to solve that unhappiness on the inside. It has to start with us. We have to learn to understand who we are and break the enmeshment that we have in our marriage with our husbands. We need to learn to untangle ourselves and become our own person again so that we can walk together with our husbands or our partner, but not be enmeshed and not be dependent on each other for our sense of well-being. And that takes a lot of hard work and a lot of commitment and a lot of willingness and courage to change to be able to do this. So we have to work on that. We have to get back to who we are and build that relationship with ourselves and do the work to become happy on the inside. And what I have learned in my life and for myself and working with others, we can't go it alone. If these things worked, again, if we could do this, we would have done it already. You can't go it alone. You need to find a mentor. You need to find a coach who's walking the talk and who has done the work and is a true teacher to teach you how to get underneath the stories that you've become trapped in, to get underneath the surface issues and really take a deep look at yourself and teach you a how-to process on how to be happy and how to have a relationship with yourself. And I promise you, if you are able to do that for yourself, if you are able to find your happiness within you, and I promise it is there. I tell each and every one of the people that I work with, and have to tell myself this sometimes too, it is not missing from you. You don't have anything wrong with you. There's nothing that you were born without. Your happiness, your ability to feel good about who you are, to want to be who you are, and to want the exact life that you have, that capacity, that ability is already in you. It's just covered up. It's just covered up by the stories we tell ourselves and the beliefs and the limitations that we live in, and trying to change all these things out here. It we get covered up, but I promise that you are in there. And so you need someone to help you peel back the layers and find you again so that you can be happy on the inside, and show you a path and teach you how to have that relationship with yourself, how to be happy on the inside so that you can bring that into your marriage and into your life. And the great thing is that when you become happy on the inside, you project that out onto your life. You project that onto your marriage and onto your husband, in the same life that you thought you had that was so difficult and so hard, and that you were, quite frankly, that we hear this a lot, miserable in, becomes the perfect place for you to be, and you are happy and you find new opportunities and new possibilities with that same life and that same marriage. But it has to start with you. It can't be working on the marriage and trying those band-aid approaches and short-term solutions. If you want long-term change and you want transformation and you want real results, you've got to work on yourself using the right strategy and the right tools, and have someone show you how to do that and walk along beside you, hold you accountable, and make sure you do the work to change, because again, change is scary, and can be terrifying to us. So we need someone to hold our hand. So that's what we need to do instead. So in short, and in summary of what we were talking about today, is that those three mistakes: reading all the marriage books or reading all the self-help books, couples counseling, and commiseration and getting advice from other people who don't have successful marriages, all those things are short-term band-aids. It's a fleeting experience. It does not last, because it covers up the real wound, which is inside of us, of feeling not good about who we are and not being happy on the inside. So we have to try a different approach. We can't use those short-term band-aids that foster that codependency and putting our happiness and our well-being in the hands of others. We can't do that and expect long-term change and to get to where we want to be in our marriages. So we need to put the focus on ourselves, find our happiness within, build that relationship with ourselves, and we need a mentor to get us there and to show us how to do that. So thank you so much for joining me today, or this evening. And if you're listening and you're like, uh-oh, I'm doing those things and I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I'm sick and tired of trying things that do not work, and you are ready and you are committed to do what you need to do to be happy within yourself and change the only person you have any control to change, then let's have a conversation. I want you to go to anewlc.com/talk, and you can book a free 1-hour breakthrough call with me. And on this call, I'm going to help you get very clear on what the real issues are, help you dive in to those root issues we were talking about today on this video, and let go of those stories so you can have massive clarity. And I promise this will be the best hour that you've spent on yourself and that you've spent on your marriage in a very, very long time, if ever. And of course, you might be interested in working with me, and that's great. And if not, that's okay too. That's not what this call is about. It's to help you get really clear on what's going on and help you see a path forward, and to give you a roadmap and an action plan to make these changes in yourself. So again, thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Have a good night.